Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, I cannot see you, but I'm really happy to be part of DroidCon. Now I can see you, that's better. And even though I couldn't be personally there to share the event and the whole atmosphere with you, and the day is nearing its end here, I still am happy to share my experience no matter the location and the time of the day. Um, I found out about Kotlin Multiplatform about a year ago, and I was told about this promising young technology that was supposed to simplify the lives of mobile developers. And as a young and aspiring developer, I was really excited to give it a try. So in the next 2 years, I was building two multi-platform apps with KMM, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to share my experience building this app so that maybe you can use it for your own applications. Usually before I start, I ask people whether they have already tried Kotlin multi-platform, but this time I will just hope that if you haven't tried it yet, which every time there are fewer and fewer people who haven't tried it, but if you're one of those who haven't had a chance to try it out yet, I hope my talk will inspire you to do so in the future. In my speech, I will go over the following topics. I will remind you what KMM is and mention why we decided to go for KMM and not some other multi-platform, cross-platform technology. Then we'll discuss what skills are necessary to get started with KMM and what to be prepared for. Then I will tell you about my first experience building a KMM app, which on the one hand wasn't easy, but on the other hand helped us to meet short deadlines. And then I will talk about our second experience building a KMM app, which was even a bigger challenge because we decided to share not only business logic, but also implemented a view model shared layer. And at the end, I will mention what, in my opinion, a team should be like, a KMM team should be like. Finally, I will share my thoughts on the future of KMM. But before I start, I want to pay tribute to several community projects, which you can see on the screen. These projects were my guiding lights in the KMM journey, and most of the things that I learned about KMM were thanks to the maintainers of these projects, which I'm really grateful to. And I also want to share my personal baby project with you, where I'm learning KMP, not only its mobile part, but also the building backend with Kotlin. So if it's interesting for you, then feel free and check out any of these projects. Now let's proceed to our first key point. Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile. What is it, and why should you try it? In simple words, KMM is part of KMP, which enables sharing code between different platforms. In my case, it was Android and iOS. Say you don't want writing networking requests twice. You can just use, for example, Ktor and write your requests in the shared module, and then use those requests to get data on the platform side. But how does it work? You might have heard about the magical Kotlin compiler, and that is exactly what does all the job in this case as well. So for Android, it converts the shared code into Java bytecode, which then can be executed in the Java virtual machine. And for iOS, it converts the shared code into source code, which then gets packed into framework and then can be imported and used on the platform. There aren't 100 of multi-platform libraries yet, but the technology is developing quickly. So if you don't find a suitable library for your needs, you can always implement things on the platform side. And the same goes for the UI and platform-specific APIs like location tracking, which I will mention later. There are other famous cross-platform technologies like Xamarin, React Native, or Flutter. So why did we decide to choose KMP and not something else? First of all, Kotlin being the recommended language for Android development would probably be the go-to choice for any other Android developer like me. But setting the language preferences aside, take a look at this brilliant comparison by TouchLab. And to put my 2 cents in, I tried Flutter a couple of years ago when it was just appearing on the horizon. And I felt like I was developing in a completely foreign environment. The error messages were cryptic, and I had to use third-party libraries for some UI features like time picker. So I felt uncomfortable, and that's why this time the question which technology to use for me was basically between Xamarin, React Native, and Kotlin Multiplatform. So this comparison persuaded me that even though Xamarin and React Native are well-grown frameworks and would be probably easier to use and would have a bigger community, I still felt like Kotlin Multiplatform had bigger potential and utility. So the first weeks getting to know KMM, I spent researching the technology, looking through the documentation, looking for some sample projects. And when we started, my hopes were very high, and I was very excited to try it out. But then the frustration started to creep in. The documentation was missing and the official project was outdated, and I had to spend hours fighting Gradle to just make the project run. I had been developing with Kotlin, and I was familiar with Gradle, so I was prepared for everything that comes with it. And I can imagine how much more difficult it can be for iOS developers who had never had any exposure to Kotlin or Gradle before. So if you're an iOS developer, then you should be ready and prepared to dive into the new environment and learn some Kotlin and learn some new skills. But no matter whether you are an iOS developer or an Android developer, you have to be patient and assertive, because working with experimental technologies is not a piece of cake, and it requires a lot of learning effort. But the feeling that you get when you make the experimental technology work is incomparable to anything, and all the effort pays off. When we started on our first project, I was working alone, waiting for our iOS developer to join later. So I was really into experimenting with different libraries and trying different things out. Our Android application was growing rapidly and everything worked perfectly. And then the iOS developer joined us, and that's when we started noticing that not everything works as smoothly on the other side. And at some point, we even had to roll back a little. So my first advice to you is if you're starting with KMP, then start simultaneously on both platforms. It will help you to notice early when things get difficult for either of the platforms. When I was Frustrated and about to give up, I came across CampKit. This project laid foundation for our first step. Instead of going all in, we decided to take baby steps and share only networking requests and local storage. So we used Ktor to make requests and SQL to store data locally. Then this functionality was reused on the platform side. Sometimes we needed to implement platform-specific features like an OK HTTP client for Android or setting cookies to the web views. And to do so, we would declare an expect function or class in the shared module and then write platform-specific implementations. And as for UI, we could comfortably use Android architecture component in Android combined with data binding and Swift UI on the iOS side. At first, this app was a rather simple app, but then suddenly it had to become a location tracker. At that moment, I wasn't sure whether we would be able to pull it off and to make both apps, both platforms work smoothly. But as it turned out, our choice to share only networking requests and local storage was a really good one because everything else that we needed, like geofencing, location tracking, activity recognition, encryption, all of this, we could easily implement separately with platform-specific APIs. But at the same time, we could still benefit from writing networking requests and database operations only once. What's more, using KMP in this case helped us to meet short deadlines right before one of our developers had to go on vacation. KMM helped us to save some time, and we deserved a guilt-free vacation. Rather satisfied with our first experience, I didn't want to stop there, and I was very interested in going further and trying to merge the platforms even more. So I was studying and looking for other possibilities and other projects when I came across Multi-Platform Playground. It seemed like a very good example of sharing everything but UI. The way it is achieved relies on coroutine view model expect abstract class. In Android, it's just an actual view model, which uses all the view model functionality, including view model scope. And in iOS, it utilizes a created coroutine scope, which is used for reactive UI changes. The communication with UI happens through mutable state flows. And in this project in in Android, we used Jetpack Compose. So we collected those flows accordingly. And on iOS, we used a convenient observer function to react to changes in the defined coroutine scope. Unlike our first app, this app didn't require many platform-specific features. In fact, it was a UI-heavy app with a lot of images and user interaction. And here I want to accent, oh, sorry, I forgot I had that. And here I want to accent the Jetpack Compose and its symbiosis with Kotlin Multiplatform. Thanks to Jetpack Compose, building UI was much more fun than for our first app. Moreover, it helped us to provide more similarity with iOS app so that even I could easily read the iOS UI code and the iOS developer could better understand what was happening on the Android platform or in the shared code. This led me to the conclusion that KMM combined with Kotlin flows, Jetpack Compose, and Swift UI is the go-to combination for KMP projects. However, this assumption still has to be verified for apps with platform-specific features. Generally, I consider both of our apps success. Certainly, it was a bigger challenge at the beginning, and personally, I found it quite difficult to uh, get to know this new framework and struggling through the missing documentation, navigating through all the new technologies like Kotlin flows and Jetpack Compose and Swift UI. But it shouldn't come as a surprise that mobile development requires a lot of learning. And at this point, I also want to motivate you to join the Kotlin Slack community, which is really helpful and can help to overcome whatever difficulties you came across when building multi-platform apps. You can ask your questions or search for answers there. What I think is even more important for the success of a KMP project is the team and communication between the team members. As you may have already realized, KMM provides for greater similarity between both platforms. The shared code affects both platforms, and it means that this code should fit both Android and iOS developers. So it's really important that team members communicate constantly, and this helps to instantly spot problems or potential threats for either side. In my opinion, a perfect KMM team consists of multi-platform developers, meaning that Android developers should be able to understand iOS UI code, and iOS developers should be willing to dig into Kotlin shared code, and in the perfect, in ideal situation, participate writing it. Because sometimes it can be faster if an iOS developer can fix the shared code that isn't working on the iOS side. For sure, KMM development is more challenging for iOS developers and requires a sort of a fighter mindset, which means that iOS developers should be prepared to learn more than Android developers and should be really curious and involved in creating the shared code. From my point of view, being a jack of all trades is kind of a prerequisite for KMM development. Another important thing is a competent and knowledgeable project manager, which can link the developers and clearly communicate what has to be done, what has already been done, so that the work isn't duplicated. Also, if the project lacks multi-platform developers, then it may be better to employ more Kotlin developers so that the time spent on building both applications is more or less equal. What's more, it's important to remember that KMM is rather young and we are still experimenting with it, trying to find the optimal use for this technology. What is the best technology stack? What is the best architecture? All of these questions require that KMM projects are led by experienced developers, which can push the project further and who know the difference between good and bad architecture. My experience led me to the conclusion that code reviews are essential for the success of a KMM project, and actually for the success of any experimental project or project with experimental features. Finally, I want to talk about the future of KMM. Personally, I see great potential in Kotlin Multiplatform, and as I mentioned before, it has several competitive advantages against other multi-platform, cross-platform technologies. But compared to other cross-platform technologies, it also has the potential market of all native Android developers. And as for native development in general, it's rather clear that you can build better apps faster. You don't have to build twice, and you can reduce the time and costs spent on a project. Therefore, as KMM grows and matures, I believe that KMM projects will become more widespread and efficient. What's more, KMM is part of a broader KMP framework, and it means that you can share code not only between mobile platforms like Android and iOS, but also with web, desktop, and even backend. In my project, I experimented with building a Ktor backend, and I found it really convenient and efficient. I enjoyed having all the code in one place, not having to switch between different projects, and being able to share the models between the backends and the mobile side. Also, being a Kotlin developer, I enjoyed having all my code in Kotlin. And I think that for small teams that don't have project managers and where developers have to communicate directly with each other to solve problems, it's easier when everyone speaks the same language. So I can totally imagine that in the future, KMP will become the foundation for KMP full stack teams that would build full stack Kotlin projects. To sum up all I've said, I want to outline several key points that I want you to take away with you. First, build once. With KMM, you don't have to build twice, and you can reduce the time and cost spent on a project. However, experimental features require a lot of learning effort, and you may also want to count that in when trying to assess the time spent on the project. Sharing is caring. If you're an iOS developer, then you have to be ready to dive into a new language and learn a lot of Kotlin. And no matter whether you're an Android or an iOS developer, you have to be patient and assertive, because learning new experimental things is no piece of cake. And communication is key. Code reviews, brainstorming, and teamwork are really essential for the success of a multi-platform project. Baby steps. If you got interested and want to try KMP for your project, then try going baby steps. First, start with sharing something small like networking and local storage, and then add other features and libraries afterwards. Parallel development. I advise you to start working on all platforms simultaneously, because it can help to spot problems and potential threats early. And finally, my go-to combination is KMM combined with Kotlin flows, Jetpack Compose, and Swift UI. So that's all I wanted to share with you. And thanks for listening to me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and other speeches.